And we're away. So thank you again, Adam, for coming back. Really appreciate the conversation you had last time. There's some really rich discussion that we found with what you do and how that aligns with STEM. Super appreciate it.
Easy, mate. No problem at all.
That's awesome. So just want to tie into some of the questions that I've had just after a bit of a reflection looking at what the M1 does. Really, something that came to me was when you're working with the M1, what do you find is the most difficult thing when you have a new employee in trying to train them up into being able to use the product and getting their head around such an intricate piece of software if they haven't really been exposed to it before?
I think it's actually not that bad. It's a bit of trial and error for a start. As long as the tech is aware of how things are wired up for a start, as long as they understand that there's a button over there and there's a sensor over there and a relay over there that we turn on, then the programming side of things kind of makes sense because you get that when this happens, then do this. And the programming language, in all honesty, it's pretty simple.
Okay.
I feel though it's something that experience is all you can do to get good at it, like there's so many ways to do things, and as with all programming, you just try to find the best way of doing it with the minimum amount of text and rules and lines, basically.
Yeah, nice. And is there some sort of manual or anything you do with them, or is it just sort of like, here's a small job and just play with that first and get your head around there before I'll throw you in the deep end, or?
Pretty much, yeah. Look, I mean, as far as it goes with M1s, I've never had any of my guys go out and do it by themselves. They'll come to site and I'll generally set it up and build the whole thing. And then they can make changes and add little bits here and there based off what I've already set up. So I'll create all the tasks that have all the rules in the background of that so that they can then just add a button that runs this task or something like that, So I never leave it all to them because, it kind of is my specialty, I guess.
Yeah, right. Well, that ties sort of perfectly into the next question. So when you're looking at a new employee, is there certain subjects that they could have done in high school that you feel would have helped them a lot better to get them ready for what you do?
If I was to advertise for somebody and had to sum up some skills that they need, I need you to know how to use a laptop and power tool. That's sort of,
That's it.
obviously not together, but if you can use a screwdriver and a power tool, and at the same time you can use a laptop to tweak a network and set up a Wi-Fi, then that's pretty good,
Yeah, right.
So the computing skills for me is a big thing because how much of our work now is all PC-based, laptop-based, web-based. It's all online basically now. And then obviously the tools.
Yeah, right. Is there any particular tools that are more useful? Like, is it more just the drills or?
Not really. I don't think it would matter if you were involved in any form of trade. That's probably enough. We're not master craftsmen of wood or anything like that. We don't need that at all. It's you can screw things into a wall and you understand the rough how a building is built. Understanding what soffits are, understanding how walls are, where the studs are, and that sort of stuff. So a bit of building construction knowledge definitely helps.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, on a job like the job we've nearly finished now, you get to see it from concrete slab on the ground to finished painting on the wall. So you're there for the whole construction, and it's great for learning. You can understand where they're running cables when there's no roof yet. It's just walls, with frames. And then you're fitting off products when your cable's just hanging out of the wall that's already freshly painted. So, you pick up a lot from that.
Yeah, nice. So the Queensland and Australian government has these set competencies that they say that students need to have by the time they finish year 12. I just want to share with you the 5 that I think are relatable to yours, and if you could choose which ones you think would be actually useful out of them.
Oh.
So there's numeracy, there's information and communication technology, or ICT, there's critical and creative thinking, and then there's personal and social capabilities, and then there's ethical understandings. Is there anything?
What was the first one again? I think
so numeracy,
Yeah. So probably that would be the least of all of them.
Okay. Yep.
I imagine, weirdly enough. We don't do anything with big numbers that's going to require any high level of skill of that.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest, absolutely. I think so. What was the second one again?
Information and communication technology.
That's a given,
Yeah,
no
that's a given.
brainer.
Yep.
I mean, we go to sites. If I'm working at a school, we go generally to the ICT office as our first visit. So, that's where we're at.
That's where most of the stuff is.
What was the next one?
Then critical and creative thinking.
That, I think so. When you're dealing with the end customer, and trying to put together a puzzle, basically, is what you're trying to do. You're trying to offer the end product with all our equipment to make it do the end result that they're after, which, requires a fair bit of thinking to see it from the ground up, but then at the same time, needing to think of how things can go wrong and making sure that it doesn't go wrong. If we do this, if we're pushing a button on a remote that opens and closes a roller door, if that remote is on the kitchen bench and a little kid pushes it and it starts closing the roller door, but meanwhile there's a Ferrari parked halfway there, I want to make sure that it wasn't my fault that roller door went down on that Ferrari because someone pushed a button. So we need to think those events through in our head to make sure that we've got safety beams on there and all that sort of stuff.
And also, I guess the creativity comes in from some working out what's the best technology available now. Like, I think that camera that you showed me, you sent me a picture of the two different cameras, like just been between 4 years worth of time. That's a huge update for the potential customers when they're looking at that.
Yeah, but also I think creativity, it gets a little bit of fun too. So we did a cellar a while ago. It was a cellar in a private house. And the guy loved his wine. It was the most amazing cellar I've ever seen in my life. He even got a blacksmith to manufacture his door, which has this massive, great big wheels that you turn, which I integrated with the fingerprint reader. So you have to swipe your finger to get into this guy's cellar so you can turn the big handles on this door and, get in there.
Yeah.
Then once the door is closed behind you, if you want to get out again, you go over to the wine rack and literally pull a bottle out of the wine rack, which separates a little magnet reed switch that I've got, which unlocks the door so you can then open it again, push the wine bottle back in. And that was an idea I came up with. I said to him, let's make this cool.
That's cool.
Rather than have just a button that you push on the way out, let's make it a wine bottle that you pull out.
And he probably loved it.
Oh, I did. Loved it. I absolutely loved it.
That's so cool. And then the next one was personal and social capabilities. So like being self-aware, having self-management, social awareness as well. Because obviously as a small business, you need to be really careful with the clients that you're working with and not losing that contract almost. Because once you lose one, it could just be one of those domino effect.
Yeah, and look, we're also going to people's homes in their private space, setting things up for their security. I mean, if they can't trust us, if we can't, relate with people well, then they're not going to trust us and want us to do the job, and if you can't portray yourself as a normal, nice person, then they're not going to trust you. They're going to feel awkward about things, and it just doesn't work. So.
Yep. Absolutely. And I guess that ties into the last one, which is the ethical understanding. So that's where you make reasons in the decision-making process and the actions that you do behind what you do, and understanding the rights of the people that you work with. So,
fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. That would apply in every business, really, wouldn't it?
Pretty much. But I think it's almost overemphasized with a small business, because if you don't get that right with the small things, big businesses can sort of wash it off, and at least they've got another store that's working fine. And awesome. So then the next thing, the other product that I was really interested in sort of leaning into, which we spent probably a little bit of time last time, was the license plate recognition camera, which apparently I've done a little research on. It's the LRC, apparently. Is that what you guys use, the lingo you guys use in the industry?
Different acronym for me. We use ANPR, which is automatic number plate recognition.
Damn it!
It's the Rego Cam.
Google lied to me.
The Australian lingo for that would have to be the Rego Cam, right? Like,
keep it short.
Yeah, but no, they're pretty neat. We've done a fair few of those so far, and And it was quite interesting when they very first came out. You had to load in the license plate templates, so you'd pick which country you're supposed to be in. But they ended up having to rewrite it all because, pretty sure if you go on the motorway and have a look at every car that goes past, there's so many different formats of rego plates, different colours, different sizes, different shapes, different amount of letters. There's no 3 and 3, there's 2 or there's 6 or there's, so many different types. So they had to rewrite it all based on that. But it ended up being, I'm guessing for them, great because it reads everything and anything now, and it reads it perfectly. So we've got a site set up out at Hope Island, and there's basically one entry into this housing area, and we've got 2 number plates cameras on that, so an entry and an exit camera, and every single car that goes in, goes out, it records the number plates. It records it all to a database.
Oh, it saves it?
Oh, yeah, it saves it all. It's not just on the footage, like it actually saves it onto the recorder, and then, that's an exportable database, which means you can then search the database. So the police will come up to site, and it happens all the time. They'll say, this car was stolen, we believe they may have been here, and the guys on site love it because, the maintenance manager, he's older school guy, doesn't know technology, but he can just simply jump in his computer, punch in the rego number, poof, there it is. That's exactly where the car came in. This is when he left, and press exit, said dump, and it dumps the footage. Cops have got it. They love it. Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's so simple. So simple.
That must be over the moon.
And then from that, because it's so clever, we've done a private residential house that opened up their vehicle gate and then opened up their basement roller door. So they drive up to their own driveway, it recognises it as their car, and it lets them in.
Wow. That's awesome. So how often in a year would you install LRC what did you call it? The Rego Cam?
Rego Cam.
Rego Cam.
I've only done about 4 or 5 different Rego cameras. It's a fairly specific job, that would require that. Part of the problem with a registration camera is the footage that you get at night time is useless except for picking up a rego. So with the way that the cameras work, with the registration plates being reflective, you can't use external light source it'll reflect back on the camera. So working different shutter speeds. So basically the footage of the camera is terrible, but you get the rego plate. So with every one of the rego cameras we put in, you have another camera directly next to it, which is a normal style of camera. So you can record the entire scene with a standard camera, and then the rego camera picking up the rego plates.
Right, so it's running in sync with the same, so you can still see what's happening, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And have you had... Oh, sorry.
Because you got to imagine that, if it's not a well-lit scene, then, it needs a light source. So that's why the rego cameras are really good like that, because they will record the registration plate in pitch black.
Gotcha. So, have you had any interesting incidents with running both of those cameras at the same time?
I've got some footage I can share to you, I'm sure. There was a new construction site at an industrial complex, and it was about 3 or 4 days after they opened up that little cul-de-sac for the public. They still hadn't finished construction, but the roads were finished, and a guy in a ute decided to come up and christen it. So yeah, I got some great footage of him doing a massive burnout. Hats off to the guy. It was an impressive burnout. There was smoke everywhere. The whole car was just engulfed with smoke, but the rego plate still worked. It was fantastic. So
it would literally cut straight through the smoke and got exactly what the license plate was saying.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
You can see it. And then coupling that with the other camera so you can see the entire thing happening. So you can see how much smoke there was. You can't even see the car on the normal camera. This license plate camera picks it up in the middle of it all. It's pretty cool.
That's awesome. And is there a particular technology behind how that works? Is it some sort of artificial intelligence algorithm, or what's sort of the sales pitch on why that works that way?
It ultimately comes down to, I guess, if you're into photography, it all makes sense, all the different shutter speeds and things like that. Nighttime CCTV is quite tricky most of the time because, you're trying to capture a moving photo at nighttime. So I guess if you have ever tried to take a photo with your phone without the flash at nighttime, if you move, it's all blurry, Yet CCTV counters that with pretty much camera tricks.
Okay.
I think it's part of it. And then it's the smarts in it that analyzes the number plates and then absorbs that and, I guess, image to text.
Yeah, nice. So, using the technology lens, do you know much about how the technology works behind capturing the image and then using that result information and then putting it back into something like the M1 to make it do some sort of a thing with it? Or is it like, does it send out a broadcast message where it's like, this is authorized, now it sends the M1 and off it goes and open up the gates? Or is there something else that goes with it?
Well, yeah, basically you pre-program the unit. You have yourself the, approved list and the, denied list. So you then add the particular number plates that you want into the approved list. When it is approved, it then sends a string through the network to the M1. And then depending on what string it sends, depending on what happens. So me, for example, if I turn up one of my work vehicles, it recognises my car, opens the vehicle gate, but not the basement garage door. Because it goes, okay, this is me, I run this task, which then lets me go and park in the business car park. Whereas the owners, they drive up, it recognises them, runs a different task, which lets them into their basement.
That's awesome. And then how many cars would be on that list then?
Countless. I think it's 1,000 or something. You can do a huge amount of bits. It's basically a text file. It's really, really simple.
Okay.
Really, really simple stuff. You're just effectively modifying a little text file and it just quickly does it on the fly, and that's that.
So not even a CSV file, it's just literally a straight normal text.
Yes, it's a CSV file if you really want to know.
Yeah, I want to know because I'm a nerd.
There's text with commas and that's it, it's done.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then from a math perspective, I'm assuming there's some level of artificial intelligence or something in play here where it's looking for those particular license plates. Is that the case, or is it something else?
No, it's not really. I mean, look, I think the license plate camera is probably quite simple in terms of how that works. Analytics is more in some of the other different style of cameras. So you set up cameras, they used to always be just 24/7 recording because the cameras had to be on, because motion detection was never really a thing, because motion, as far as a camera used to be concerned, would be just comparing this pixel to this pixel, and that one just changed color really quickly, so that's motion.
It's had to move, okay.
Yeah, but now the smarter cameras, because the problem with those was every time a cloud would go past, there'd be a shadow on the back lawn, motion. So a cloud going past, or a car driving down the street with headlights that happen to throw into the frame would be motion. So it wasn't reliable. Nowadays, though, some of the smarter cameras, you can identify objects, shapes. So most of them nowadays will have people identification and vehicles. Mm-hmm. So I set one up on a job site when I was first testing them, and I had it set to vehicle only to send me notifications. So I set it up that way. I walked straight past the camera, no notification at all. I then jumped in my car, drove past. It recognised it was a car, sent me notification, let me know that a car had just driven past.
Wow.
And vice versa. So you can then have it to be just people. So a box blowing past or a dog or whatever it is doesn't trigger it anymore. It analyzes shapes, realizes it's a person or a vehicle, and works off that.
That's awesome. And is that built into the actual camera unit itself?
It is now, yeah.
Wow.
A long time ago, like that sort of smarts only ever used to be post-processing, video-based on the recorders or the PC, whatever it was recording.
Yeah.
But yeah, cameras have got that built in. There's even object-based ones now too. So there's the new one I was reading about a while ago, hard hats. So they'll have a camera on a building, looking at a construction site, detecting people, and then going, yep, that person's got a hard hat, yep, everyone's good. But then somebody walks on without a hard hat, it triggers an alarm, lets the on-site foreman know that this person, because he'll just get a text message on his phone with the image saying this person is walking around without a hat. Cool stuff.
That's amazing. I'm sure the foreman would be happy with that.
Yeah.
So from a science perspective, is there a sort of a level of understanding that you need to know for how the camera actually captures the light coming into it? Like I know you briefly mentioned sort of the shutter speed and the maybe the frames per second and all that type of stuff. Is there something there that you need to have at least some fundamental understanding before installing these units?
A while ago, yes, but cameras are so much smarter now. Like you used to have to position a camera in a way so that, like, if you were a retail shop, for example, and you wanted to see people coming in, if you had it behind a counter looking at the front door, and that front door happened to be on the beach's surface and it was ridiculously bright, all you would be seeing is this ridiculously overexposed beach part, and anything inside the shop would be terrible. Or you would reverse that and you'd have the shop being, visible, but then the doorway would be just super bright and white. So you have to position it differently. But now cameras, again, have got built-in text that you can pretty much highlight that little box and say, fix it, and it does it,
That's awesome.
Wide dynamic range. So basically it compares the light sources, averages everything out, and goes, right, so the whole scene should be at about this sort of level of brightness. This is obviously super exposed. Let's fix that. And it does that on the fly as well. So,
like digitally?
Yeah. Does it, on the camera live as it's processing. It's awesome.
That's amazing. So it's able to reduce the exposure level for like the gateway to heaven kind of look that you would have if it was overexposed.
Yeah.
It can just...
It just turns it off.
That's amazing.
Yeah, there's some pretty neat stuff. Like the cameras have got a lot of smarts, so I mean, you could almost just buy a standard camera, slap it up, and it'll do a pretty damn good job.
Yeah, right. And what's the rough cost on something like that?
I mean, cameras nowadays are dropping constantly. You pick up a decent little one for $250. Top end cameras, like license plate cameras, the good ones are about $1,500, so they're not that bad anymore. A lot of years ago, it would be a huge amount of money to get any camera with some sort of smarts, but it's fairly standard now.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. And then from an engineering perspective, do you need to have some level of understanding of the assembly of the parts together and how they all sort of sync with the, like, I'm assuming there'd be a data cable that goes into the camera and then also a separate power cable?
All the cameras we use generally are power over Ethernet, so meaning that there's 48 volts coming up the same cable as your data cable. So you can buy a camera off the shelf, get a patch lead off the floor, and plug it into a switch, and as long as that switch is PoE, it turns on. It's plug and play.
From just a normal switch?
PoE switch. So
okay.
There's two types of switches, basically. There's the standard switches, which are just data, and then there's PoE switches, which have power now. They're outputting power. So things like wireless access points around the school, they'll all be PoE, so there's literally just one cable running between devices. Cameras obviously are PoE. I don't know, not sure how many different devices are that use PoE, but there'll be a fair few. But it's the same cable. You don't have to buy a special type of cable. The smarts are inside the camera. So if you plug a non-PoE device, say you've got a printer and you plug it into a PoE switch, it's not going to
You're right.
It's not going to throw 48 volts into the printer and blow it up. So once you've got that data connection, if it's a PoE device, it's looking for it, sends a signal, switches on, PoE gives it power. So, all those sort of smarts are built in as well. It's idiot-proof. I could give you a camera and a cable and say, plug it in, Steve, and it wouldn't blow up.
I don't know. I could challenge it. Oh, that's awesome. So when you're installing a camera then, is there certain alignments that you need to put with the new technology, with this, like the license plate thing? Like, do you need to set it a certain place and then adjust it a couple of times till it...
Yeah, definitely. So license plate cameras is very, very finicky in terms of setup. You've got to try to get it set up at a particular angle. You don't want to be more than about 30 degrees if you can, away, in terms of where the camera is and where the car is. You want to be with about 30 degrees. The positioning of the camera is super important, and then once you've got it, you need to then try to make sure the plate is square and not skewed. So this roundabout, for example, where I've got the cameras positioned, as it's coming onto the roundabout, as every single car hits this one particular point, whether they're turning left or going straight, there's that one point where I'd be square to the registration plate. So I made sure that my camera was installed there. So regardless of where they're turning, we're zoomed in and focused on that little window of where the registration plate is going to be going. So they're quite fiddly to set up, definitely.
So
and then, sorry, yep.
Oh, sorry. You keep going. Sorry.
And I was going to say there's then the other cameras when you've got things like the people detection, vehicle detection, setting those things up as well. There's a lot of stuff you can do. You could literally set up people detection on this part of the screen, but then on this part of the screen, I want a removed item alert. So think of an airport. You've got somebody walks along, drops a bag, walks away. That bag is there for more than, let's say you set it to 20 seconds. There's a random object appeared on the screen, triggers a notification because there's a new object there in the way. The same reversed as well. You might have a warehouse where they have all this stock, high-end stock, for example. You'll set it up that anything gets removed out of this little boxed area on the camera that you've just drawn on the screen, sends off an alert, So, yeah, you can do just about anything with a camera for those sort of things. You can, draw individual little shapes and say, just this section here. Then at the same time, I'll draw a line here. So I drive down my driveway, nothing happens. But if I walk down my driveway, it sends me notification. So I know if anybody is walking down my driveway, but it doesn't bug me every time I drive down it.
Yeah, right.
Because they're crossing my digital line that I've drawn during the setup.
So with coming back to the camera that you had set around the roundabout, do you ever have any accidental reads? Like, say the person is driving out of the gate estate, and then you read the license plate that they're leaving, but then the front gate just suddenly opens. Is that something that you need to consider, or?
I initially tested, one of the very first ones I did was a private one, and I pulled the number plate off in my hand and thought, right, I'm going to see what happens. And I went for a walk with it, and it did, and it opened, which I thought from my end, I guess going back to the points we talked about earlier, I'm trying to figure out what could potentially go wrong here. You want someone just having their number plate stolen and it's the key for their front door, as simple as that is. So that was version 1 though, but now they've got all those smarts in it. If I'm standing there holding a retro plate, it's also scanning to see the rest of the shape should be a vehicle. But it's not. So the old ones used to pick up, the writing on the side of the car sometimes or something like that, or it'll pick up, there might be like a logo on the front of the car with the phone number. It would sometimes pick that up. But yeah, the new ones now will identify the car, the bonnet, and it generally goes right in the center is where the registration plate will be, and it will show you that.
That's cool.
And the neat thing though as well is if there's been this unknown scan, if it couldn't tick the little box of what it thinks should be the registration plate, it flags it as an unknown. So it's still there. So if it does fail, which, it's going to happen, if it doesn't do a perfect pickup, it'll still flag it as an event, and you can just cycle through those events as well. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
So as a hack to that, like really sort of playing devil's advocate, could someone steal someone's license plate, put it onto like an old Falcon, and then drive on in?
Oh yeah, definitely. It definitely could. But this is a private house. If you're out and about and you've had your car registration plate stolen, you'd be fairly certain about it. But as that backup flag, I never made it actually disarm the house. It literally only disarmed the basement. So they drive in, it opens to the vehicle gate, opens up the basement roller door. They drive down to the basement, a couple of tins of paint and some ladder and some bug spray. That's all they've got access to. If you then have to go inside the house, you have to punch a code in.
Gotcha.
Now, and that's entirely up to the owners to whether they give that code out or not. There's no way in without a physical code, and that's what they chose to do because security was important for them. So yeah, it was obviously a small chance of somebody stealing your number plate and putting on another car, but we countered that by making sure that it doesn't turn the alarm up anyway. So.
Of course. Playing chess while I'm playing checkers. That's awesome. So from all the STEM different subjects, so like science, technology, engineering, math, technology seems to be sort of the main thing here again. Just wondering, just to pick your brain, if there's anything out of those other three that you could think of that aligns a bit more with the Retro card camera with either mathematics, science, or engineering?
I mean, mathematics, I think, would probably be a big part of it. Like exporting massive databases. If you had it on, think of some of the ones on the motorway, that sort of stuff. Like the sheer numbers and volume that has to be crunched through that to do it so quickly, and that would be synchronizing with their databases. Like there'll be some pretty impressive stuff up in the background, numbers-wise. Science-wise, I mean, look, without science, they wouldn't have figured out any of that stuff.
Yeah.
The engineers are the ones that then figured out how to make it all fit into a box, and then the technology are the guys that made it work with a computer. So it all works together. So,
do you feel that the box is shrinked over time? Like the first version was a little bit larger than what the current version is, or?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and thieves know this, and I tell people this all the time. If you've got these ridiculously old, big, ugly box cameras up in your wall, I'm going to assume they're not working because that's my job. But a thief who is on the opposite end of my job also knows that they're not working because it's old and crappy and huge.
Yeah.
So absolutely everything's shrinking, as you'd imagine. About the only thing that isn't shrinking is the physical lens size, but the whole body of the camera is shrinking.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. I guess the power of the processors and whatnot getting so much smaller.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it like your phone, right? When the first phones came out with a camera in it, it was amazing, and now you've got 16 megapixel cameras inside a phone or something stupid like that, and it's, this big.
It's ridiculous. Awesome. So if you were to rank in order of importance, ranking from 1 to 4 of the different STEM subjects, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, with your weekly sort of routine, if you were to install one of these, which would be the highest importance in order from 1 to 4?
I would go, you couldn't do my job without being up there with technology. You could be an absolute maths boffin, but you still couldn't do my job.
Yep.
You could be science, graduate, still didn't know how to program a network up or how technology works. It wouldn't work. Engineering, much the same. So I'd go technology.
Yep.
Then I'd probably go engineering because you have to understand what you're attaching your devices to, where your devices are going. You've got to have an understanding of how things physically work. We don't want to be hanging a 15-kilogram camera off 2 little tiny screws that are built to hold 4 kilos. And so you got to understand a bit of engineering, screwing into steel and metal or concrete and that sort of stuff. And then I think between science and maths, probably tied equal third, really.
Yeah.
I couldn't do without either of them, but not incredibly, not heavily used. I wouldn't say on a regular basis anymore. Yeah, it's been made simple,
which makes it good for you.
So it makes it for me when I'm employing 18-year-olds from school that they're just so used to having an app do everything for them. It literally does. So yeah.
Well, sorry, go.
You don't have to think like, I remember at school, we had calculators. Like, why do we need to figure out how to do maths when there's a calculator? Same argument. It's why do we need to figure that out when there's an app that does it? And apps figure out a big chunk of that for us.
Yeah, right. And I guess the skills that the students need when they're preparing for this sort of role, you pretty much just want someone that rocks up on time, has a good enthusiastic sort of approach to what they're doing, and some level of computing understanding. Like that almost seems like the three things, is to clarify what you've talked about.
Look, my first thing honestly would be the presentation and the way that person is, because if that person can't relate to people well, then they're not going to be able to do their job, because we deal with the end user. We're dealing with the people that's literally pushing the buttons on those things in probably 90% of what we do. So if you can't explain to somebody and talk to somebody then you could be the best technician in the world at physically installing something, but if you can't teach somebody how to drive it or explain how it works or understand what is needed from that person's needs, then there's no point.
It's not going to happen anyway.
Yeah, that'd be me. And then obviously, yes, then use some tools, have a bit of a technological understanding about how things work, and positive outlook really. Because I mean, I find it fun, but that's just me.
I think a lot of people find your job fun.
Probably.
Yeah. Awesome. Is there anything else that you would like to share about the Rego camera that we haven't really covered, or we pretty much covered most of the bases?
I mean, look, the Rego cameras are pretty amazing in what they do. I haven't installed as many as I would have liked to have, but I mean, I think that's because there's a need for them in certain places. I wouldn't go installing a Rego camera on my home. There's no point. I have no need for it. But I guess there's probably a few clients that could benefit from it that I probably should have suggested to and maybe haven't. I think schools could benefit of this quite a lot if you've got registration cameras not doing anything other than just recording registrations. Just preventing dramas and figuring things out. You may have a reason that if this car comes on site, you want to be known about it because those parents may have had a rough breakup and father shouldn't be there, and things like that. It'd be great to have on a ban list so that if it was to appear, they're notified about it straight away before anything happens. So I think that's the big part of it. I think using a registration camera, someone's still in their car, they haven't gotten out yet, preventing whatever could be bad, I think it's great for that aspect.
Yeah.
But I think other than that, it's just really good for just tracking where people are coming and going from, and it needs to happen. You need to know about it.
Yeah, awesome. No, that's thank you so much. This has been really informative for me, and I'm probably going to be sharing this with some of the experiences with my students. So really, really appreciate it, and thank you again.
Easy, no problem at all, mate. It's a pleasure.
No worries. Thanks again.
Cheers, Steve.
See ya.